Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome salam wa rahmatullah. How are you doing, Hassan?
I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. So today we'll start I'm going to start talking about the Khulafa Rashidun, and after that we'll go to the tafsir of from the beginning, Surah Fatiha, and some of the shorter surahs at the end. Were you in the tafsir class we had, the short tafsir class from the last 10 surahs?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. I
What
think
what what was that one about?
we did explanation of the last 10 surahs of the Quran.
No, I don't think I did that one.
Okay, so after we do this topic, we'll go to those tafsir of Surah Fatiha and some of the surahs at the end of the Quran, the ones that we commonly recite. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So let's just start off by me asking you a question. What do you know about Abu Bakr radiallahu anh?
He was the first. He was one of the first greatly guided caliphs. He was, I believe, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu friend or uncle. I forgot which one.
He was a close friend.
A close friend. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
he wasn't the uncle, but he was the father-in-law.
Uh-huh.
Do you know how he was the father-in-law?
His daughter probably got married to Prophet
Yeah.
Muhammad.
Do you know his daughter?
No, I don't. Was it Khadija?
It was Aisha.
Aisha. Okay, Aisha.
Yeah. So Aisha was the daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else do you could you share?
Um, I know he was one of the first people to follow Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu.
Yes, very good.
I know he shielded him from a lot of the hate that the non-believers gave him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I think that's a good starting point and a good basis. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, his so Abu Bakr wasn't his real name. A lot of the companions, actually it's common for the Arabs that they would be named Abu something. It was almost like a nickname or like a
Uh-huh.
title. So do you know what Abu means?
Father, right?
Yes. So Abu Bakr, he was named the father of Bakr, although he did not have an actual son named Bakr. So he was given that you could say title or kind of almost like a nickname. Uh, but his real name was Abdullah,
Mm-hmm.
and his father's name was Abu Quhafa. Abu Quhafa. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was only 2 years younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Mm.
Yeah, so very close in age. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, even before Islam, before the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ, he was very wealthy. He was a merchant, so he had businesses, and he was very wealthy. and a very successful merchant or businessman. So, like you said, he was one of the first people to accept Islam, to believe in the Prophet ﷺ. There's a little bit of difference of opinion in who's the first person. Okay, so you also have Khadija radiallahu anha.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. And then you also have Ali radiallahu anhu, right, who's the fourth Khalifa. He is also considered one of the first people to believe in the Prophet ﷺ. Now, how old was Ali radiallahu anhu at the time? Okay, so let's talk about prophethood. What age was the Prophet ﷺ when he was given prophethood? Do you know?
40?
40. Very good. So 40. So that means Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is how old at that time?
38.
Yeah. And Ali radiallahu anhu, he was around 9 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was very young.
Mm-hmm.
So the scholars say that the first man to accept was Abu Bakr, first woman to accept was Khadija, and the first boy to accept was Ali radiallahu
Mm.
anhu. So they were all, kind of the first. So this was the first, you could say these were the first Muslims. Right? Islam at this time was not, the huge amount of thousands or millions of followers. This was the very, very beginning, just a handful of people, just the very close people to the Prophet. Now, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh accepting Islam, the story of that is very different than Umar radiallahu anh accepting Islam. Are you familiar with that?
I know Umar radiallahu anh, his story of converting was that he was actually gonna go. He was before a non-believer, and he was gonna go kill Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then
Yes.
he heard the Prophet reciting a phrase from the Quran, and he thought it was so beautiful that he converted.
Yeah, that's the gist of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh accepting is very different than Umar radiallahu anh. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he accepted immediately and he fully supported and followed all throughout.
Uh-huh.
Um, so how we're going to discuss about each Khalifa is we're going to have one class about the just kind of learning about the companion and their relationship to the Prophet ﷺ and some of the good their good virtues and good statements that the Prophet ﷺ and other companions had about them. So we'll dedicate one class for each, and then
Mm-hmm.
the second class will be after the Prophet ﷺ, meaning during their khilafah, during their leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to mostly talk about Abu Bakr, who he was, what he did, what was so good about him. Next week we'll talk about his leadership role, how just of a leader and ruler he was for the Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
So um, at the very beginning, there was Bilal radiallahu anhu. He was a slave by a man named Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Umayyah ibn Khalaf. And when Bilal radiallahu anh accepted the Prophet's message, he was also one of the first. His slave master used to torture him and torment him. He tortured him in such a bad way where one day he, in Arabia, it's extremely hot. It's so hot that even the sand or the ground is unwalkable with bare feet. One time when I went for Hajj, the masjid and the the tiles were all packed, so we had to pray on the road, the
Mm-hmm.
pavement. So, and then I took off my slippers to just pay on the pavement. I didn't have a full, Johnny Maz. I just had kind of like a small sheet just to cover my head or my face when I make sajda. So when I was praying on the pavement, like I couldn't even stand straight. I had to keep like lifting one foot. It was extremely hot. So just to give you an idea of how hot it is.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, Bilal and his slave master, to torture him, he made him lie flat down on the sand, the extremely hot sand, made him lie flat down, and it was so hot that it was like almost, boiling his back. And
Mm-hmm.
then to make it worse, he put this huge rock, almost like a small boulder, on him so that he wouldn't be able to move. So from one side he's being burned, on the other side he's being like crushed. And he commanded him to leave Islam or say statements of kufr or disbelief. He was extremely resilient and extremely strong and firm in his faith. That the only thing he kept repeating was Ahad, Ahad, which means one. It means I only believe in one God. I'm not believing in all of these idols and these stones and these other false gods. So during that time, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, being the generous, influential, respected man that he was, he came to Umayyah and he said, let me purchase this slave from you. So Umayyah bin Khalaf said, why do you want this, worthless, whatever, And he said, okay, fine, I'll sell you him for I think it was like 10 dirhams, 10 dinars or some amount, which was like not a huge amount, but he said, I'll sell him to you for this much. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, essentially he paid that amount and he freed Bilal radiallahu anh right there on the spot. So Umayyah bin Khalaf, he said that he is so like worthless that I would have given you for him for much less. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh said, well, for him I would have paid much, much more. So Bilal was also one of the first believers, and Abu Bakr freed Bilal from his, oppressive slave master. And this is what Abu Bakr used to do. He used to support the believers in this way. At the time of the Hijrah, right? Are you familiar with the Hijrah or what that refers to?
Flight, right? And when they had to leave, Makkah.
Yeah. They migrated from Makkah to Medina.
Right.
So in the beginning, the Prophet ﷺ, it was just him, and he told Abu Bakr to come with him, and they had one, you could say, travel companion who kind of like steered the camel for them. So it was just them three. So they left Mecca secretly, and they tried to avoid the main path, right? So from Mecca to Medina, you had one straight path. So they went around to try to, stay off the radar of the mushrikeen, of the Quraysh. So it was just them two. So what Abu Bakr did is he kind of left some. He took all of his wealth from his family, his own wealth, but he took it all and he took it with the Prophet. He said, I'm going to use this in the path of Allah. But his father, he took care of his children, meaning like the Abu Bakr's children's grandfather. He was there and he kind of took care of them while he was gone. So Abu Bakr he left with the Prophet and he stopped in one cave. They both stopped in one cave, and I think this is a famous story that you've heard. That when they entered the cave, they also were trying to hide from the people who were looking for them, the Quraysh, Abu Jahl. So there was one incident where in this cave, Abu Bakr was just sitting, and the Prophet was lying down, sleeping, and his head was in the lap of the Prophet, just resting. And the Prophet was sleeping, and then he woke up because he heard some sound from Abu Bakr, or he felt like something dripping on his face. So when he woke up, he saw that Abu Bakr was like in a lot of pain, right? He was like kind of groaning from pain, and I think tears were even coming down from him. So the Prophet asked, what's wrong? What happened? So Abu Bakr said that there are some holes in the cave, And I tried to cover as many holes as I could. I covered this hole with one hand, this hole with another hand, this hole with my foot, but there's another hole that I couldn't um, that I couldn't block. Um, or he filled like some cloth in it to cover all them. So one of the holes that he was covering, there was a snake or a scorpion that bit his hand, and he still kept his hand there because he didn't want anything to come and harm the Prophet ﷺ. So he kept his hand there even though the snake or scorpion was biting him. So he didn't want the Prophet ﷺ to wake up. He wanted the Prophet ﷺ to stay sleeping, to stay resting. He didn't want the Prophet ﷺ to wake up, even if it meant that he's going to keep his hand there still enduring that pain. So this is just an example of um, how caring and how devoted Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was to the Prophet ﷺ. Um, are you familiar with the story of the Isra and Mi'raj?
Um, no, I don't think so.
So this is the story when um, the Prophet ﷺ, he traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem at night, in one night. So it's about, I think, like 900 miles or 900 kilometers, I'm forgetting, but it's an extremely long journey. So for someone at that time to do it at night was a miracle. So this is a long story where the Prophet ﷺ, in one night, he was approached by the angel Jibril alayhi salam, and Jibril alayhi salam presented him with the buraq. Buraq was that animal that it's like a horse, but it can fly. So again, this is all like angelic. It's not like a myth or a fairy tale. This is a true angelic miracle that the Prophet underwent. So in that journey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also ascended the Prophet to the heavens, where he went past the universe, and he at the end of each universe, right? So you have this world, the galaxy, the stars, this entire universe. The Prophet went all the way to the end of this universe with Jibril alayhi salam, and he went to this gate. This gate had some angels that were blocking it and guarding it, and they asked Jibril alayhi salam, "Who is this with you?" Jibril alayhi salam said that this is Muhammad. So the gate, the angel, the gatekeeper let him through, and he kept going all the way until he went and spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a long story. We could probably cover it in a different class. But the point is, when the Prophet ﷺ came back the next morning, then he told everyone that what he experienced and what he had done the previous night. And the Quraysh were like mocking him and disbelieving him. They said, like, what is this? What is this craziness? This is obviously a lie. This is made up stuff. So they actually went to Abu Bakr. That's the main point of this part of the story, is the way they went to Abu Bakr and they said that, do you believe what your companion, talking about the Prophet Muhammad SAW, do you believe what he's saying? Have you heard what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
So Abu Bakr's reaction was not to start getting doubt about the Prophet SAW. It was not to start disbelieving in him. And it was also, he didn't say that, oh, you know, he must have not said that. Like, I don't believe he said that because that's too hard to believe. He didn't say that. What was his response? His response was that if he said it, then it's true and I believe it. He said, if Prophet Muhammad SAW said it, then it's true and I believe it. So he was a man who had unshakable faith, unshakable support, immense faith in the Prophet ﷺ. Anything that he said, he would follow, he would obey, he would believe. Um, that's why if you heard, you probably have heard this, his title is As-Siddiq, right? Abu Bakr As-Siddiq. As-Siddiq comes from the Arabic word sidq or sadaqa. Sadiq. Have you heard Sadiq? Prophet,
No.
one of the titles that they would say about the Prophet is that he's a Sadiq and Al-Amin, meaning he's the truthful and the trustworthy. So
Mhm.
similar to that is a Siddiq with the Prophet. The Abu Bakr is a Siddiq, which means he was extremely faithful in the Prophet. He believed and he attested and he would bear witness. He would accept. He was extremely accepting of whatever the Prophet said.
Mhm.
Another thing about Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is he had an extreme level of hope and reliance on Allah. So there was one story where the Muslims they kind of needed the Muslims to help give uh, money to support the believers, right? To support the believers um, in general, and also the believers who didn't have that much wealth, right? The poor,
Right.
uh, impoverished believers. So one time, Umar radiallahu anh, he went and he thought, I'm today, he said, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh always does better than me. He always surpasses me. They had this kind of competition in good. So they were competing in doing good. Like, who can do more? Who can, like the
Right.
companions who can recite more Quran, who can do more good deeds, who can, sacrifice more, who can spend more, etc. So now Umar radiallahu anh, he said, today I'm going to surpass Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, because I'm going to give 50% of my wealth. Everything that I own, I'm going to give 50% of it, half of it. That means if you have if you have two cars, I'm going to give one car away. If you have a huge house, I'm going to give half of the value of it away. If you have like $100,000 in your bank account, $50,000 you're going to give away. So all of that he collected and he gave half of it. That's something that we cannot even, yeah, none of us can really imagine. Our zakat is only 2.5% that we're supposed to give every year, right? Just
Mhm.
2.5%. That's if you divide everything into 40 parts, you give 40. That's a tiny amount, and even that, seems like a lot. But Umar Adlan gave half. So then he went to where they're donating, and he went and he was like, okay, I'm finally going to surpass Abu Bakr. Then when he got there, he heard that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he said that I'm giving everything away. 100%. Everything that I own, I'm going to give it all, and I'm going to leave with my family only Allah and His Messenger. That I'm going to give everything away. I don't need, my house, my camels, my cattle, my wealth, my gold, my silver, my land. I don't need any of it. Other believers need it. I'm going to give it, and I'm going to, wait for my reward. I'm going to give it all. So then Umar radiallahu anh said, I can never beat Abu Bakr. I can never surpass him.
Mhm.
This is the level of, um, you could say, trust. But not, we would not be able to do that. We would not be able to give everything away, or even half, because we will start like missing. We'll start missing our belongings. We'll start feeling that loss, the regret. Right? We'll get like these thoughts. Oh, I wish I didn't do that. So we're not at that level. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was, uh, he was that's why he was the leader of all um the companions. He is the one that after every prophet, he is the next best human being, next best um follower of the prophets. So it's all the prophets, and then after the prophets, it will say that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. One time, someone asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's the most beloved person to you? Who do you love the most, basically? So he said, Aisha, his wife. He said that I love Aisha the most. And then the person asked, what about from the men? Who is the most beloved man to you? And he said, her father. Again, her father, Abu Bakr. So he was
Mhm.
the most beloved to him. There's also another narration where the Prophet said that I repaid everyone back. I mean, like, whatever good people did to me, I was able to pay it back in this world. Whatever favors people did to me, I was able to pay them back in some sort of favor. But he said, except Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is one person and the only person that I was not able to pay back in this world. I was not able to thank him enough for his favors that he's done for me. His reward, Allah will give him in the hereafter. I will not able to do that.
Mm.
Um, Also, at the time when the Prophet ﷺ was approaching, his last days, and he became very sick physically. So usually the Prophet ﷺ would lead the prayer. But when he became more and more sick, he was so sick that he would be in the tub of water, you know, to kind of cool his fever and to calm his sickness. He would try to get up from that tub, and then he would lose consciousness and he would fall. He would lose control. That's how sick the Prophet ﷺ became towards the end of his life. And because of that, he did not go and lead the Muslims in prayer. So what he said is, he told Aisha radiallahu anha, go tell your father to lead the Muslims in prayer. Tell him to be the imam for the people. So she said, he's a person who has a really soft heart. He won't be able to lead the Muslims because you know Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was the closest person to the Prophet ﷺ. If he knows that the person who he loves the most was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he is so sick that he cannot lead the people in prayer, and then he also kind of gets this insight or foresight that this is like the Prophet ﷺ is about to leave the world. He's about to pass away. So this immense sadness because of that, his heart will be so soft that how can he get up and lead the people in the prayer? How can he go up and you know um, not just fall down in sadness? How is he going to be able to stand firm and lead people in prayer? So that's what Aisha radiallahu anha was referring to. But the Prophet ﷺ commanded her again, tell him to lead the people in prayer. So in the absence of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was the one who led the people in prayer, not anyone else. This shows that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he had a status or a level that was above all of them. There was one time though where the Prophet ﷺ, he came out of his home. His home was connected to the masjid. It was just one door. You opened one door and then he's at the masjid. There was one time when he entered the masjid while the people were praying behind Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at that and he smiled because he saw that his ummah is in good hands. He saw that his companions are continuing the religion together, and they will continue after he passes away. He saw that they are under the leadership of the prayer, leadership of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. So he saw this and he smiled and he gained contentment and happiness.
Mhm.
He had enough strength one day to actually go to the masjid and pray with the congregation. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he started coming to the masjid, the companions they kind of noticed that, oh, the Prophet ﷺ is feeling good and he's coming to pray with us. So they kind of indicated, or they kind of you know said some tasbih, or they kind of indicated, they might have like made some sound with their hands to indicate that the Prophet ﷺ is coming. So then
Mhm.
Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he also noticed that the Prophet ﷺ has come. So the Prophet ﷺ, he indicated to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh to stay as the Imam. You lead. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, out of respect and love, for the Prophet coming in, after so long, after such hard sickness, to come back to the prayer. He stepped back and he wanted the Prophet to lead. So Prophet went and he actually sat down. He was still very weak. Prophet sat down and he was leading Abu Bakr in prayer, and Abu Bakr was following the Prophet and everyone else was following Abu Bakr because that's who they saw was standing and leading. So this was, you could say the level of authority and respect that the Prophet gave to Abu Bakr. There was also a statement that he made. That he said, if I was supposed to make anyone my Khalil. Khalil in Arabic means um, it means friend, but it's a very close friend, and it's a friend where it's the type of friend where you can only have one of that level of friendship. Your best friend, right? So the Prophet said that I I would have taken Abu Bakr as my Khalil, as my best friend, but I have made Allah as my best friend. So he's basically saying that my closest and best friend is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, I would have taken Abu Bakr. But you can understand that from from the humans, from the mankind, the closest person to Sayyidina Umar was Abu Bakr. There's actually verses in the Quran that talk about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, right? So there's one verse that in Surah Tawbah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the hijrah, meaning he's talking about the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu hiding in the cave. So he's talking about the two people who were hiding in the cave, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was a little worried. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was a little worried for the safety of the Prophet ﷺ. He was worried that the Quraysh are going to come and find them and attack them. And the Prophet ﷺ told them that don't worry, Allah is with us. So this conversation and this story is mentioned in the Quran. So the Quran talks about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Now there is a group, I think you're aware of them, the Shias.
Right.
They actually do not like Abu Bakr or Umar. They they think that when he became the Khalifa, that so how the Khilafah, the Caliphate happened is when the Prophet ﷺ, he actually passed away. Then he did not explicitly tell the believers, after me, Abu Bakr is going to be your leader, or after me, Abu Bakr is going to be the Khalifa, the Caliph. He did not tell them that. So once the Prophet ﷺ went back in his home and he was, just resting with Aisha radiallahu anha, then eventually he passed away. After he passed away, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he came into the house of the Prophet ﷺ. He saw him, that he already passed away, and he went to his head, and he kissed his head, and he said, some words of condolence and some dua, and then he went out. Before he went out, all the companions, this kind of word was spreading around that the Prophet ﷺ has died. The Prophet ﷺ passed away. So imagine, like, the Muslims, they have their beloved Prophet, their leader, their family member, their role model. He's no longer in the world. So the amount of grief and shock that affected them was immense. So it was so immense that you have Umar radiallahu anh, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. He got up and he said that some people are saying that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. He said the Prophet ﷺ has not passed away. He has just went to visit his Lord. He just went to speak with his Lord, like Musa alayhi salam went to speak to his Lord, and he's going to come back after some time, and he's going to kill all the people who are lying about him. So you have to understand, Umar radiallahu anh, he's a very, very, powerful individual, and he felt a really strong emotion for the Prophet ﷺ, and he was in shock. He did not believe. He did not see it happen with his own eyes. He just heard people talking, so he thought it was a false rumor. So he was so shocked about this that he didn't believe it. So that was his reaction. It was grief and it was just shock. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he came out of the Prophet's house after seeing that he had passed away. And he told Umar radiallahu anh, "Oh Umar, calm down." And then he started addressing the believers. Then he said, there are some of you who say that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. He said, this is true. Indeed, the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. And he said, but you should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still here. Allah is always alive. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never passes away. And Allah never dies. And then Abu Bakr radiallahu anh started reciting the verse of the Quran, which says, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. And Muhammad is not but a messenger. Muhammad is just a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Many messengers have passed before him. أَفَإِمْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انْقَلَبْتُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِكُمْ. And he said that this is mentioned in the Quran, that if he was to die or if he was to be killed, are you going to just turn away on your heels? Are you going to just leave your religion? Are you going to just forget about everything that happened in the past 23 years? Are you going to stop following his way and Islam and just stay in a state of shock? So when Umar radiallahu anh heard this from Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he fell to his knees and he said that, although I've heard this verse in the Quran many, many times, I felt like this was the first real time that I heard this verse, because the actual experience, he was experiencing the verse. This verse is talking about the Prophet passing away, and they were reciting it all along while the Prophet was with them. But now once he actually passed away, and Abu Bakr is telling them that yes, the Prophet came and he was our most beloved leader, but the reality is that he is a messenger, and his duty and his role was to send a message. Once his message is complete, once his task is complete, and his obligation is fulfilled, then he's returning back to his Lord. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop worshiping. That doesn't mean we're going to be divided as an ummah. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, like I said before, Abu Bakr had a very soft heart. When he was leading the prayer, when the Prophet was sick, he was crying so much that he couldn't control, because he was extremely sad. But when it comes to leading the people, he contained his emotions, right? And at this time, it was Umar radiallahu anh whose emotions kind of, he was shocked, so his emotions took him over. But at this time, when the Muslims needed a leader, when the Muslims needed someone to guide them and someone to contain them, someone to console them during such a time of shock and grief, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was the man. He was the leader that they needed. He was the one who steered. He was, the captain of their ship after the Prophet. So that's a huge role to take. Imagine the Messenger of Allah, the one who, he is being revealed the Quran. He's teaching the believers. He's communicating with Allah. He's communicating with Jibreel alayhi salam, with other angels. He's able to see some of the unseen. He's able to see some of the future, some of the past of the past nations. Now this connection is finished. It's cut off. So now to be able to take that responsibility, it was a huge task. But Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he fulfilled it, and everyone pledged allegiance to him. Everyone accepted. Now there's some there's some details about Ali radiallahu anh accepting him. The Shias kind of bring up. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that next week when we talk about the actual Khilafah of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. What did Abu Bakr radiallahu anh do as a leader after the Prophet? Right? He was a leader for 2 years only. So he was 2 years younger than the Prophet, and he passed away 2 years after the Prophet passed away at the same age, 63. So next week we'll talk about his Khilafah, his what did he do in those 2 years? How what kind of leader he was? What did he get done politically and religiously?
Right.
So, do you have any questions?
No, that's about it.
Okay, inshallah. Yeah. I'm not sure your method of reviewing or taking notes, but inshallah, the main points you can take notes of. But the point of this is to know who were the leaders, the first leaders of the Muslims, and what kind of role models they were, and what is the ideal Islamic society, because we're very far away from that in terms of our principles and in terms of the time. It's been thousands of 1500 years. So inshallah we'll learn what is a true Muslim leader, especially those who had direct contact with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sure. Okay. Well.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying anything.
Okay. Okay, inshallah. We'll meet next week at the same time.
Yep, inshallah.
Okay, take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.